The New York Giants lose an ugly game to the New York Jets in overtime on a rainy and gray afternoon. What happened and where did the Giants go from here? We've got all that and more coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, P-Train, and ladies and gentlemen, you know, I have covered this New York Giants team, as you guys probably know, for over 30 seasons, and I've seen some great wins, I've seen some interesting losses, and I've seen some downright ugly losses. And the Giants' 13-10 loss to the New York Jets in overtime. Oh my goodness. Not just from a performance perspective, but good gracious. Just the whole handling of this team up until now. So, warning, I'm going to probably do a little venting here. And if I get too emotional, I apologize because, you know, I just don't know what this team is thinking. I don't know what they're doing anymore. You know, I always took pride in knowing and being able to, you know, come to a reasonable and educated guess. I just don't know anymore. And I apologize because you guys deserve answers and I wish I could give them to you. But we'll talk through this. Now, I'm not going to rehash the game per se, but what I want to talk about on today's show, I want to talk about kind of the big picture, a couple of things that have really bothered me about this team. We'll talk a little bit about, you know, the performances. There were some bright spots, but mostly some gray spots. We'll talk about that. And then where does this team go from here with the trade deadline as of Sunday night, less than 48 hours away? So that's our agenda here on the Locked On Giants podcast. As always, I thank you for tuning in. So many of you are everydayers and you tune in, win, lose, or draw, and I appreciate you. And I appreciate all the newcomers who might be on this podcast and everybody in between. So let's get into it, folks. All right, I've got a vent here. I really do. There's a couple things that bothered me from a big picture perspective, and this goes down to the coaching. Now, usually with the coaching, I try to see their perspective. I try to look at it through their eyes. Even if I don't agree with it, I try to see things through their eyes and try to make sense of it. There are a couple things here that I just can't see through their eyes, no matter how hard I try. The first thing is how this team has handled injuries. Now, let's go back to week 1. All right, you guys remember week 1? Andrew Thomas getting hurt on the blocked field goal, which happened early in the first quarter, and he went and he stayed in the game and made it worse and worse and worse. And oh, by the way, here it is. We just finished week 8 and Andrew Thomas still isn't back on the field. All right, well, you figure, okay, it happens. But here's what I don't get. So the Giants had kicker Graham Gano on their injury report the last 2 weeks. Gano did not get an injury designation this past week, so he was good to go, allegedly. But then a report comes out from NorthJersey.com, Art Stapleton, who I believe wrote the report, that Gano said he's going to need off-season surgery on his left knee, which is his plant leg, because something popped and he's got pain and swelling in that knee, but I'm going to push through it. Now look, I don't blame Gano. I admire Gano for wanting to push through it. But here's where I have a problem with this whole situation, with these injuries. Gano, when he is healthy, he is Mr. Reliable, Mr. Automatic. We all know that. We have seen that. He has been compromised the last 2 weeks. All right? Today, he missed 2 field goals that if he's healthy, he makes. There's no doubt in my mind. I don't care what the conditions are. He makes those 2 field goals. So Here's what I don't understand. And maybe somebody out there who's listening to this or watching this can explain it to me, because I just don't understand what the coach was thinking here, even though he was asked about it and he tried to explain it. All right. So you get to the end of the fourth quarter. Now, earlier in the game, Gano missed a field goal attempt wide left. Again, because I suspect his plant leg, he's not able to properly plant, and that compromises his kicking motion. Gano, by the way, he made no excuses after the game. He said, it's on me. I was out there. I have to make those kicks. I admire him for that. But what I'm saying is, should he have really been out there? All right, so let's go to that fourth quarter missed field goal, because this was kind of key. So the Giants have 4th and 1 on the Jets' 17-yard line with 28 seconds left. They need 1 yard, all right? At this point, they've been running Saquon Barkley up and down the field, all right? Saquon Barkley in the second half of the game ran the ball 25 times, which for him on most days is a full day's worth of work. And that's another topic we'll get to in just a moment, Saquon's heavy workload. But 4th and 1 on the 17. The Jets were out of timeouts. There were 28 seconds left on the clock. So you mean to tell me that you were going to send out a compromised kicker to try a field goal, which, when he had trouble making a field goal prior? All right. Instead of maybe handing the ball off to Saquon Barkley, telling him to run around a little bit to take some time off the clock and, leave the Jets with virtually nothing left to work with, should the kick fail. So what the Giants did was they sent out Gano in the field goal unit, probably figuring, okay, you know what, we're struggling to score, and Gano gives us the best chance at anything to get his points. And he misses. All right. And in the process, only 4 seconds come off the clock. So they leave the Jets with 24 seconds, which might not sound like a lot, but was a lot. Now, what happens next? Zach Wilson completes a deep pass to Garrett Wilson, on which Kayvon Thibodeau gets penalized for being offside. Wilson completes again to Alan Lazar for 29 yards, right? So that's back-to-back big pass plays. They spike the ball, and then Greg Zerloin kicks a 35-yard field goal to tie it up. So I go back to the question. Now, normally, I would say, okay, you have a healthy Gano, you've had trouble scoring, you got Tommy DeVito in the game, which I'll get to in a second, I promise. So you go with Gano, get the 3 points on the board, and everything's okay. But Gano was compromised. And I just don't understand the thinking there by the coaches. You have a compromised player whose plant leg is injured, and you're sending him out there after he botched a field goal earlier in the game? Shouldn't you have just taken time off the clock? What was they thinking? All right. So that was the catalyst, which of course sent the game into overtime. And then of course the Giants, the offense wasn't able to do anything, with or without Tyrod Taylor in the game. It didn't matter. And the Giants ended up losing. And oh, does that hurt. Now I want to talk real quick about Tommy DeVito. All right. So Tommy DeVito comes in for Tyrod Taylor, who suffered a ribcage injury. And as I record this, Tyrod Taylor is in the hospital. He's being kept overnight for observation. So best wishes to Tyrod. He's a good dude, and I really hope, he gets well soon. So you have Tommy DeVito come in, and okay, you hand the ball off on the majority of, I think it was like 33 out of 35 plays in the second half. They handed the ball off to Saquon Barkley. They had designed run plays. So you're saying that, okay, you had this guy, Tommy DeVito, on your roster, on your practice squad, you've been developing him, and hey, we don't trust him to throw the ball. I mean, how does that make sense? If you don't trust him to throw the ball, why do you have him on the roster? Why do you have him on the practice squad? Now, the only logical thing I can think of is he didn't take a lot of reps during the week in practice. So contrary to what, Dable says when he says, well, if Daniel Jones doesn't practice during the week, he knows the system, so we're not worried about that. Well, Tommy DeVito's been with this team since the spring. He knows the system, allegedly. So you don't trust him to go in there and throw a few passes? I mean, granted, the offense was bad, but at least try it? Does that make any sense? So I really don't know what the coaches were thinking. And when I look at this loss, yeah, there was the bad penalty on Thibodeau. Yes, in overtime, Adoree Jackson committed, a defensive pass interference penalty. I put this loss on the coaches, folks. The coaches and to an extent the front office, because all year long with these injuries, to me, it's like, what are they doing? What information are they using? Darren Waller goes and he pulls a hamstring again. What's going on? I mean, I would love to know more about the sports science department and how they come up with their conclusions. Because right now, they're not, it's just not helping. And I know football's a violent game. Stuff happens. I get that. But something just still isn't right with this team when it comes to injuries. And that's frustrating. And then you compound it with the handling, okay, this guy he's good enough to go out and practice, even though he's got a compromised plant leg and he's our kicker. Come on. I just don't get it. All right. We've got more coming up right after this. Please don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. And this week, Vinny's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week is Patriots wide receiver Kendrick Bourne. Bourne has been reestablished as the top target the past 3 weeks with Mac Jones, catching 19 of 22 total targets for 188 yards and 2 touchdowns. New England's passing game has revived, and Bourne has been the biggest beneficiary as the team's top outside target. He should stay hot in a nice matchup against the Commanders' secondary at home in Week 9, one that mightily struggled against the Eagles' receivers last week. And Giant fans, just as Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football knows how to help your fantasy championship, eBay Motors knows that when it comes to your vehicle, having the right parts makes all the difference. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED, headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you'll be burning rubber, not cash. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay's Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions apply. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. This is a venting session. It is a therapy session, whatever you want to call it. I feel your pain, folks. I sat through that game too. And unlike those of you who might have had it on the TV or had been at the game in the rain, which, by the way, if you were in the game or at the game in that crappy weather, I salute you because that was pretty bad. But you guys had the option of getting up and walking out or turning off the TV. I sat through it. Part of my job. It's you do what you got to do. But anyway, let's talk about some specific performances, both from an individual perspective and from a team perspective. The Giants' red zone offense, can we just say it? Terrible. All right? 0 for 2 this week. Over their last 4 games, they are 1 of 11 in the red zone. You ain't going to win very many games when you're 1 of 11 in the red zone. This week was the 5th time in 8 games they were over in the red zone. All right. Broken offense? Yeah, I think so. All right. Let's talk about defense real quick. This is a positive stat, actually. Over the last 3 games, The defense has allowed an average of 11.3 points per game. Not bad, right? You would think, oh, wow. With that kind of performance, they should be 3-0. 1-2, folks. 1-2. Giants offense averaging 11 points. All right, so you have 11.3 points given up versus 11 points scored. That's why the Giants are 1-2. All right, simple math. Some individual superlatives. Saquon Barkley, as I mentioned, career high 36 carries, 128 yards. Came out to a 3.6 average, which isn't great. But it was clear right from the get-go, and I said this going in, that Barkley was going to be the central point of the offense. And he was, and this was before we knew the rain, the forecast and whatnot. The passing game, I think I mentioned this before. The passing game finished 6 of 14 for 7 yards, but you throw in the lost yardage from the sacks, and it came out to what, -9? 16 yards lost on sacks. So yeah, I think it's like -9. How does that happen? I don't know how that happens, but it did. It did. New punt returner, Gunnar Olszewski. I tripped over that one. Actually averaged 9.3 yards per punt return. All right. So he returned 6 punts, 56 yards, 9.3 average. Not bad, all things considered. And oh, by the way, ball security was pristine. So that was a positive. Defensively, Bobby Okereke, of course, led the way again with the tackles. He finished with, let me just see real quick. Bobby Okereke finishing with 9 total tackles, 7 solo, 3 tackles for a loss, by the way. Bobby Okereke having another solid game. But the defensive star, and unfortunately he will not get Defensive Player of the Week, although I think he deserves it, Kayvon Thibodeau. That guy that on Sports Talk Radio last week, certain hosts were questioning, just how effective this guy was and if he was a bust and all this stuff. Come on. Thibodeau had 9 tackles, 6 of which were solo. So he was 1 behind Bobby Okereke. Thibodeau had 3 sacks for 41 yards, 3 tackles for a loss, 3 quarterback hits, and a forced fumble. Thibodeau is on his way, ladies and gentlemen, to becoming the first player on a Wink Martindale coordinated defense to notch double-digit sacks. It's just a matter of time. If he stays healthy, Thibodeau will get there. All right, he's having himself a good year. Now, is he having Aiden Hutchinson type of numbers or Micah Parsons type of numbers? No, but the kid's having a good year. So anybody who thinks he's not, delivering in this defense, please look at the tape, because for what they're asking him to do, he's delivering. And yes, his run defense can be improved. I agree with that. But Thibodeau, he's right now probably one of the best players on this defense, not named Bobby Okereke. All right, so what else we have here? Yeah, otherwise the Giants, for the most part, nothing really stood out. I go back to the individual performances, and I'll just turn back here to those in the game book. And, the Giants targeted, let's see, Barkley, Waller, Breida. So that's 6. Slayton, Bellinger, Wan'Dale Robinson. No pass targets for Jalen Hyatt. Why not take a shot deep down the field? I get it. The offensive line, again, was hit and miss. They did get John Michael Schmitz back, by the way. But Justin Pugh struggled a little bit there at left tackle. But no deep shots attempted that I can recall. Nothing to Jalen Hyatt, who last week told me, I want to be more of a complete receiver. and do some of these underneath and shorter routes. If you're looking to pick up yards after the catch, why wouldn't you try and get the ball into this kid's hands? I don't get it. One of many things I don't get about what the offensive coaching is all about this year. I really don't. So let's see. Bellinger and Wan'Dale Robinson each came up with 0 receptions despite getting 1 target apiece. Darius Slayton, 1 of 2. Matt Breida, 1 of 1. Darren Waller, 1 of 2. Barkley, 3 of 5. Like I said, Barkley had the best game on offense out of everybody. He was the workhorse. And, I just, the whole performance, even Jamie Gillen, the punter, who had been punting so well, he had to punt 13 times. And he put 5 inside the 20, but there were a couple of clunkers in the batch, which you would kind of expect when you have to punt over a dozen times. So just overall, ladies and gentlemen, this performance, yuck. That's how I could sum it up. Yuck. It was just bad. An overall bad performance by the offense, which just cannot get out of its own way. And now they've got Waller injured. Tyrod Taylor is injured. He will probably miss time. We don't know if Daniel Jones will be back next week. They got to add a quarterback to this roster. They're going to have to do something about kicker, because I'm sorry, I don't know that Graham Gano makes it through the rest of the year. I'd be surprised. This team's going to have to make some moves over the next 48 hours. We'll talk more about that, actually, right after this. Hey, Giant fans. So between my work here on the Locked On Giants podcast, on Giants Country, and being on site in East Rutherford to bring you all the coverage of the Giants, I just don't have time some weeks to get to the grocery store to make sure my fridge is full. Luckily, I don't have to, thanks to DoorDash. With DoorDash, I get everything I want when I need it delivered straight to my door. For years, I've also trusted DoorDash to deliver freshly made meals from my favorite restaurants, and they've never let me down, whether I've been in East Rutherford or I've been at home. And now that they've added grocery delivery to their offering, it's made my life so much easier because I can get what I want from my go-to stores like BJ's Wholesale and Wegmans. DoorDash has thousands of grocery stores to choose from, so you'll find one in your neighborhood that's right for you. You get what you ordered, or they will make it right, and you can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a no delivery fee on eligible orders with a Dash Pass membership. And now for a limited time, you can get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to $20 when you use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout. That's 50% off up to $20. No minimum subtotal and 0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Terms apply. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina P-Train. I wish I were coming to you guys with a better show in terms of a Giants win, which they really should have won this game. They really should have. The Jets, not that good of a team. I'm sorry, they're just not. But the Giants, I don't know what they're doing anymore. I really, truly don't. But I will say this. The next 48 hours are going to be very interesting. All right, so let's talk about that real quick. The trade deadline is Tuesday, 4 o'clock Eastern. The Giants have, according to Over the Cap, and as of Sunday evening, $508,243 worth of salary cap space. Folks, I don't have to tell you, that ain't enough to get them through the rest of the year. Not if they have to add a quarterback, which they probably will. Not if they have to add another kicker, which they probably will. And not to mention all their practice squad elevations that they like to make and will probably have to continue making. Will Darren Waller be okay to go, or will they have to call up Lawrence Cager next week? We'll see. The point being is something's got to give with this team. One of those big contracts, whether it be Leo, whether it be Adoree Jackson, one of those big contracts is going. I don't know who, but they're going to have to either move those contracts or they're going to have to restructure. And thus far, we know Joe Schoen doesn't want to have to restructure because it means he's going to have to add on to the back end, which means more dead money down the line. But you're not making it through the rest of the season, 9 more games, with $508,000 of salary cap space. It's just not happening. So I would say probably keep an eye on Leonard. You know, maybe Leonard goes to Las Vegas. I think he'd be a fit there. Adoree Jackson, who was healthy after missing last week with the neck injury, maybe he goes to Buffalo. Buffalo could probably use some help at cornerback. Now, the team has told Saquon that, you know, he's not going to be traded. And I don't think he will be, but I think it was also kind of premature to make any kind of promises to him. Because for all intents and purposes, the season right now at 2-6, I don't think the Giants can recover. I'm sorry. I know that's being negative, but I don't think they can recover. So if you get somebody who comes along and offers you a decent package for Saquon, and you know you only have 6 draft picks right now and you're not getting any comp picks next year, why wouldn't you take that offer? So, you know, it's going to be interesting now because I wonder if perhaps Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll kind of back themselves into a corner now with Saquon by making it public. Oh, you know, we told them we're not going to trade him. And Saquon, you know, saying, oh, they told me they're not going to trade me. And now if they get a great offer and they end up trading him, just imagine what that's going to do in the locker room. Because now it's going to be like, oh, we can't trust what these guys say anymore. So that's something to keep an eye on. And the shame of it is look, if they're not going to re-sign Saquon next year, and I don't know if they are or won't, you know, what they're planning to do. But if there's no chance of them paying Saquon probably what he's going to be looking for, and Saquon, by the way, continues to make a case to be paid, then, you know, they're basically going to let him walk, and they'll get maybe a comp pick for him that they can't use until the following year. So how badly did they botch that one up? It's like better to just say nothing at that point. You know, the rumors fly. Whatever happened to, you know, hey, Saquon, you know, unless you hear it from us, don't worry about it. You know, did they necessarily have to go right out and say, hey, we're not trading you? Because now I think they kind of backed themselves into a little corner there with Saquon. So again, folks, I mean, I just don't know what this team is doing anymore. And I always take pride in being able to see the logic behind some of their moves and decisions. And some of them are just, they've been out there. So that being said, next week, the Giants start a 3-game road swing. They have Las Vegas, then Dallas, and then they go to Washington before coming home and hosting the Patriots before the bye week, which for me can't get here soon enough. What will happen? Well, we got to get through the next 48 hours to see who's on this team and who isn't. We've got to see who they're bringing in and who, you know, they're going to roll with. Some big decisions coming up for this Giants team. So it's going to be interesting. Keep it here on the Locked On Giants podcast. I'll bring you everything you need to know. Emergency pods as we need it. We'll cover it all for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope this podcast was somewhat therapeutic for you. I know it was for me. And I will see you tomorrow, Giant fans.